Oh, I've been awake since 5
in the morning.
p.m.
Oh, I was like, oh wow, that's super early for Kalani. That's amazing. And you're like, oh yeah, it's 5 p.m.
Temper your expectations when it comes to me.
I got very
Expect
impressed.
nothing less.
To see, this might be a cold open, but again, but just the visual of what I'm looking at after last debacle about a headphone. I think this is amazing. This is
The fact that I'm holding a mic instead
that
of using a stand.
your ensemble.
Look, I'm in.
I think it's about a year in pandemic. I think now we're officially loopy.
I'm in pajama pants. I got a hood on because my hair is horrifying. Like, we are really in the end game, boys.
we are peak pandemic. Mm-hmm. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the podcast.
Our scuffed podcast.
The longest cold open we probably have for this
It'll
episode.
probably get better from here. Don't worry.
And for folks, excited whenever there's a Kalani episode, it's going to be a long one. So strap in.
It's always the long ones.
It's always the long ones that it's like us. I feel like this is something that we used to do when pre-pandemic, like especially on Saturdays, right?
Yeah. I mean, whenever we had the podcast, we'd always just talk about whatever and then chill. So it's kind of like that, except now we talk about stuff on camera versus behind the camera and then not talk about anime as often.
Apparently. Shit, I still want to do...
Well, okay, in my defense, I haven't touched an anime in months.
And here's the crazy part. My niece still, like, she is watching a lot of anime recently, and I feel like, oh crap, I'm watching so much like other television.
She's embracing her inner weeb.
And that's a good thing, because I feel like there's a lot of art and there's a lot like new stuff that she's like exposing herself to like different stories and things like that. Apparently she's
on a related note.
Yeah.
Sorry, go first.
Oh yeah. Apparently watching Attack on Titan, which is interesting.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Attack on Titan is like,
it's a bit intense.
Do you hear that?
It's Kalani's ghost.
No. It's my cat. Do you want to see my cat?
Oh, do you have a cat? Where's your cat?
Here, hold on. Let me get her really quick.
Everybody has cats.
Technical difficulties.
I can finally use the technical difficulties.
Use it. Hold on.
I can't even speak. God damn it. It's a cat. What?
This is Fluffy.
Fluffy.
She's getting angry. Oh god.
Oh no. He's uncomfortable. He's the cat is camera shy. Aww.
That is Fluffy. She is a stray cat who we technically adopted her, kind of.
Yeah.
And the long story short version of everything is, for some reason, a lot of animals that we currently have adopted us as family. So my dog was the same way. I have a beagle named Jack.
Ooh,
and like he's such an old man now. I looked at an older picture of him and I was like, oh my god, he's so white now. And then I looked at the picture and I was like, oh my god, he had color before.
Oh no.
But yeah, no. So very consistently we end up with a lot of stray animals that adopt us as their own. And so very recently, I think she was actually like super tiny. She was like this big.
Like a teacup.
And then she grew to that monstrosity. Is it scuffed? Just
No, actually, it's not that bad. Actually, the
I'm like one of the
oh, I was gonna say it's like your family is like Snow White. Animals are just attracted to your household.
if there's a Snow White in this family, it 100% is my mom. My mom just attracts animals. Like my cat loves her, all the dogs love her. She's the Snow White of the family. But like I'm pretty sure you can't hear it because the last time we were recording, I like to me this mic picks up a lot of noise, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure for you it sounds very clear.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, like when we're doing it right now, I hear my mom go, wah wah.
That's amazing. I just like one day, like there's a mental image of me as your mom in the backyard singing to birds as they dance around her.
She's in her dress.
Out in the
Okay.
forest.
But anyways, to go back, so your niece has been watching a lot of Attack on Titan recently.
Yeah, Attack on Titan, and if she's watching that, maybe Uncle Niece time could be like Full Metal Alchemist or something like that.
Oh my god, yeah. You need a Brotherhood. Yeah, you need to do that.
You know, the crazy thing is, if I were to think back in my childhood, it's like I watch a lot of this is an impromptu anime podcast, but I remember watching a lot of like really like mature content, not like okay, not like what you're thinking, audience, please like stop, not like that, but like Full Metal Alchemist, Fooly Cooly, I would say has a lot of suggestive themes that maybe a young third grade Brian shouldn't be watching. Did I mention Cowboy Bebop in that order yet?
No.
No, Cowboy Bebop I watched, and then something that would be pretty no, I wouldn't say that's bloody, but I watched Tenshi Muyo. I vaguely remember Evangelion, and I remember fondly the OVA for Read or Die, but I don't remember the series. And I'm still trying to find that series,
You should find it.
yeah. So it's basically she's exploring these animes around the same time I would have.
How old is your niece, by the way, if you don't mind me asking? I forgot.
I think she's like about to turn freshman in high school.
Actually, so I was gonna say this earlier, but on a really, really funny related note, my younger cousin, he recently is getting into anime as well. And actually, funny enough, he also just recently got a Switch from us on Christmas. So he and me, and then very recently he got Animal Crossing. So he's on the Animal Crossing hype right now. But so I have like my aunt, my uncle, and him come over ever since forever on Fridays. And so very recently he asked me about Demon's Lair because he keeps seeing artwork on it, but he doesn't know what it's about. And the part of me in my head, like a small part of my head just kind of got a little worried because I was like, I don't know how okay you are with blood, because like Demon Slayer, it's kind of like 6 degrees of separation from actually being very like realistically gory, but it still kind of is. But I remember like when I was younger too, I watched a lot of like anime that had a lot of blood in it and just stuff that happened. And so I kind of like had to reevaluate. I was like, is he okay with this stuff or is he like too young? It's really hard for me to tell now.
Well, I gotta think it's like it has to be a conversation you would have to have between you and your family member, because like I feel like between me and my niece is like I think given the whole pandemic and everything that's happened recently, she's all like, oh, I want to explore these themes. I want to be there just to like make sure it's like, oh, you understand that like, this is a fantasy, like there's themes here and like, like there's artistic value in what they're saying. And like, here's like, how some people has misconstrued it, especially for Death Note. It's like,
oh yeah,
which is weird. I was also recontextualizing and rethinking like like who is the protagonist of that story, because he ends up being something that he was different by the end of the series. And it's like, and you think about it, I don't want to make a direct connection, but it reminded me of Joker. Like I rewatched Joker recently, and like the idea that folks were idolizing this person that would unilaterally like dish out justice, like death to people, and everybody would say yay for him. But I also thought, that's a little touchy. Now I guess as I get older, I'm like, is that right? Is that right for one person to have that much power?
I mean, you know what they say, no one man should have all that power. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But see, like, I think when it comes to characters in particular, it's a little bit different, because it's like if they have an engaging story behind like their character, I think it makes it interesting. And ironically enough, Joker is like one of those characters that isn't supposed to have a backstory, because that's I think the way that they originally wrote him was that he wouldn't have a backstory, because that's what made him scarier. You don't know what made him turn like that. But I do think like idolizing characters that are villains, I think that's like one thing, right? But like, you know, like it very easily can happen in real life where you idolize a person that has done something completely wrong. And I think that's where the issue becomes much more prevalent, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to knock people from liking the movies they liked. I just think it's weird, slightly weird that like, you know, these like you could take out themes from the films, but like the idolization part of it is like, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way, at least now that we have apparently a former leader with a golden statue of himself in Florida. Did you see that? Did you see that recently?
I only know about Dolly Parton.
Oh no. Oh yeah, the Dolly Parton statue where she was like,
I don't want a statue.
Yeah, maybe in the future let's revisit this, but right now, no.
Well, it is. I like in the current political climate that we're in, I do. I look so good.
You're like,
let's get ready to rumble. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I think the idolization of like certain. Sorry, I hear my mom in the background. Of certain people is a bit strange. Like, I definitely think what you're referencing is a little bit strange, you know? But it does get to a point where you think about it and you're like, well, you know, theoretically, you know, if God and Jesus were real people originally, right? And they're where they are now, where it's a religion. Like, is that the furthest that can go? You know, like the technical theoretical idolization of somebody.
I suppose so.
Because if you think about it, right? Well, we already know my opinions on Trump from previous podcasts, so I guess
many previous podcasts.
But you know, a lot of people hold him like on a higher pedestal now. Like they think of him as a savior. So, you know, I don't know if that recontextualizes things for you, but I find that interesting.
Yeah, like, this is getting like a touchy subject here.
A little bit.
I think I don't know. It's like what we celebrate, especially when it comes to statues and that. That's weird. We're gonna hit like Confederate statue territory.
Yeah, I mean, here, this is if you want my quick opinion about the Confederate statues, right? My opinion is more than likely this, which is, if you look into the history of a lot of those statues, a lot of them were created in the later 1960s and 70s or so,
like during the civil rights movement.
Right. And it's not even really like, you know, created back when they were still alive or anything like that. It was just a creation in terms of, from what I understand, to show oppression.
And then Robert E. Lee was famously quoted in saying that, yeah, please don't do this.
Yeah.
Please don't.
I like, okay, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with those statues, but I think I mean, okay, there is something wrong, don't get me wrong, but I think they shouldn't be put out in display and honored the way that they are. I think they should be put into like a museum or something that recontextualizes how the significance of those statues. Just because if we were to completely get rid of it and throw it away, isn't that technically like erasure of our history?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that have very strong opinions on this. If you're asking me the questions, I would rather have them like go into like the city dump sort of situation.
Um,
But if it was something where we could contextualize it like what you're saying, if we're going to contextualize it in a way that we could learn from it, like maybe a museum of understanding the role and purpose of these Confederate statues and what they mean and why we had so much stock in creating and like distributing these images,
yeah,
these names, these memorials, these individuals, like why are they celebrated in the communities that they're celebrated for, and in
right.
some cases are in states where the Civil War never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I would, I think this is a challenge. It's like, how do you want to record this? Because like, as much as I want to get rid of them, I also feel like, as someone that loves history, there is something there that needs to be learned.
Yeah, I guess my main concern as time changes and whatnot is the erasure of the flaws of American society.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't think America's 100% an inflawed, like a perfect country. You know what I mean? Like, there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of things that are wrong about America. It's not like the end all be all of what a country should be and what democracy should be like. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't want to get to a point where all of the mistakes that the country has made or our leaders have made becomes erased.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of like the Confederate War and whatnot, right? Like in context of those statues, I think it's very important and significant that the future kids learn about all of the difficulties that a lot of people back then had to be put through and a lot of the bad stuff that people did back then in terms
Right.
of like slavery and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think having just the descriptions in our textbooks is enough, because having a physical statue which represents those messages is much more, I think, powerful and meaningful than something that's written in a book in a paragraph or so.
I I agree, and I also disagree, though.
Mm.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I guess.
Oh, I don't mind.
but but the thing is that why can't we do both in that sense? Why can't we have a situation where that those stories can be immortalized in the education system, that there can be a recognition of like not just slavery, but like, you know um of like the massacre at Tulsa, right?
yeah.
Or the overthrow of a democratically elected black um electorate in, I believe, was Georgia.
Mm.
I need to double check that. But like an overthrow of a government that
Mm.
was democratically elected during, like after the Civil War, right?
Mm.
Or like Japanese internment or the Chinese Exclusion Act. It's like we could have like those public displays, museums, and things like that. But I think the the scars of American history should also be reflected in its history books.
Yeah.
I think we need a strong, hard look at ourselves and say, "Hey, this happened. This is how it happened, and we just need to make sure it doesn't happen again."
Yeah. I honestly agree with that sentiment. I think
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I sound so cynical about it is because I have no faith that that'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not because I don't want it to. I actually would love it if our history books explain so much, but I think I have a sense of being cynical about that changing just because, I went from or I'm pretty sure everybody in the American educational system has gone from learning from those textbooks and then coming out of it and learning so much more about it through my own research versus something that the books was telling me. And
Yeah.
I think also you know, back when I was when we had history classes and stuff, you know, I don't think a lot of the problems and issues of certain situations were highlighted in our textbooks. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it took a lot for me to like learn about it and understand it. And there are a lot of things that if I didn't go out and do my own research or watch videos on it, I would have never known about. And so I think the reason why I say it's very significant to have those kind of like in museums and in contextualized versus over a textbook is because just the fact that I've learned so much post high school and school versus like actually like now, I guess, or like learning what I learned on my own.
Yeah, that's true. And then also like another angle to this is like we bring our baggage of like being Asian American to the mix too. And I know like whenever textbooks do gloss over the Vietnam War, do gloss over certain things that happened, it's like if you think it's like when you're doing world history, you know, how are you going to record those details and things?
Yeah.
um you know, does that mean, you know, having that I had this long conversation, does that mean teaching students in an elementary system about really hard hitting facts about what had happened in the past?
Mm.
And some people may say no, but you know, to some degree, you know, and I always bring up Japan and Germany. It's like it's the difference between recognizing the issue and then burying the issue.
Yeah.
Like in Germany, like you're ever since kindergarten, you are learned the atrocities of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
In Japan, it's like a switch narrative of like, well, it happened, but we're also like now we're in an anti-war sort of situation. So it's like, how do you recontextualize the atrocities that Japan had done? You know, in the form of like, you know, the rape of Nanking. It's like acknowledge, yeah, that shit happened. You know,
Yeah.
it happened in the Philippines. It happened in, I believe, Southeast Asia. You know, it's like if it happened there, you know, acknowledge it, right? And so
Right.
I think that there are examples and there are models that other education systems can use. It's just does the education system now in the United States, where it's already at this point where it's like semi defunded, right? And low on funds and resources, can they take, you know, this more information about, you know, what the country has done? It's tough. I think it's tough. I don't think we have the answers on the podcast, and I don't think two moderately or low level like podcasters have the answers.
We definitely do not, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have like a certain sense of distrust for our educational system right now, but
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like, you know, certain instances of it have been privatized.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think with the last administration with the nomination of Betsy DeVos, who is historically known for being part of charter schools, which are essentially are privatized and much more monetarily based, I believe. I think it's just,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make me feel like I have faith in the higher ups in the educational system, because I do know that teachers try their best, you know, but I
Yeah.
don't believe any like of the higher ups in the educational system will do it any good. And you know, I think it very well is like the people who are in power will control what kind of messages you as a kid or a student will learn and understand. And I think a prime example of that is just like how, you know, the reproductive system and, you know, like, you know, those sex ed classes are taught across the country, because you have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who have, you know, courses on abstinence versus like, you know, protected. Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that banned on YouTube? Am I going to get banned on YouTube for saying? But anyway, um, like that kind of, those kind of discussions, right? I think they're very based on the region that you come from And, you know, I have my own opinions on how things should be taught, but I do think the fact that just across the country we already can get a whole bunch, like a entirely different educational history, I think says a lot about, you know, the US as a whole in terms of education. And I think that kind of bolsters my distrust of it.
Is it distrust, jadedness, or nihilism that's like the biggest thing for you?
Well, we already know that I'm a cynic. No.
Yes, we all know that Kalani hates love.
I mean,
oh my God, I should have cut that part of the podcast and like released it on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
love is dead.
You know what? What makes it even worse? I have yet to watch it, but I already know that if I were to watch Wonder Woman 1984? Yeah, I would have punched a hole in the TV.
You know, the good thing is that we do have Wanda Vision now. So.
Oh my God, Wanda Vision! Oh, it's so good. Like, I genuinely feel for those characters, and I actually watched like a video on it very recently because whenever I get into something, like whether it's a show or anime or whatever, I tend to do a lot of like video watching based on whatever I'm watching at the time. And so I've been watching WandaVision a lot. So somebody had pointed out that throughout the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, like before WandaVision came out, that reviewers said they didn't really have faith in relationship, even though it was established in the comics that they did have one. But certain things and choices and the way that Marvel decided to portray those two characters made it show that they made it show to them that there is some like genuine love between those two characters, and the chemistry between the two actors is really good, which I agree with.
Yes. I've had several criticisms about Marvel in the past, but in this past week's episode of WandaVision, I don't know how much I cried. It is so good.
It's really good. Is this gonna be a spoiler podcast, or are we just not gonna talk?
I think we could mention it in passing, but
we have a history of it. It's fine.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's quickly finish the thing about schools real quick.
Okay, reel it back.
Okay. Well, let's reel it back because I do want to talk about WandaVision, and I also do want to talk about Asian Americans.
Yes.
So I'm trying to stay on topic. Not on topic. I'm trying to be understanding of time, because
we'll do heavy discussion first and then end with the lighter.
We'll end with the lighter. So in terms of like is it distrust, nihilism, or just like a lack? What was it? The lack of faith in our education system that you feel?
Yeah. I don't know if maybe it's been brought out that are from like things that have happened in the past couple of years, I guess.
Is it your cat?
No, I just heard rustling and I thought it was but I don't know. I think like when I was younger, I know for a fact that I took things at face value, and I think to a certain degree I still do, because I am an idiot. And I fall for things very easily. So like if somebody were to tell me like, hey, look over there, I'll look. That type of thing. So back when I was younger, I think when I learned about things, I very much was like, well, I mean, they're explaining it to me, you know, and they have a history of it and it's written in the book, so it must be real. And I'm not saying that it isn't real, but I'm saying that there's more to it than what they explained to me, you know. Like, for example, you know, as the years have gone by, a lot of people have gone, I'm pretty sure, are on the same page about Christopher Columbus.
Oh, I was thinking you were about to go down that road too.
Yeah, I think everybody generally will say that Christopher Columbus is shit.
Mhm.
You know, sans the fact that he basically founded America,
Right.
but thought it was not America. Anyway, so like I mean that I think is a hindsight thing. And I think, over time certain facts and things will change about a lot of the political figures that we see or hear about when we're in the educational system. But I think
Mhm.
it would have, I guess, explained a lot. I guess maybe it's my older monkey brain now that I would have liked to, learn that, the leaders that we had were not all inherently like good people. Like I grew up very well thinking like, I should look up to George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. I made pictures of them when I was a kid, and like I guess in retrospect, I did learn about those things as a kid, and I learned about them being like slave owners when I was older. So I guess that kind of explains like how you explain history to a kid versus how you explain history to like a teen.
Yeah, I know there was like a famous book called like Lies My Teacher Told Me, and it's just basically, oh, so now you're in college. Okay, here's this book that tells you all the real shit that happened and
I
things
need
like
to
that.
I need to read that.
I think it came out like in the early 2000s, but it's like it's a famous book, and like one of the famous examples is like, well, we put Helen Keller on this pedestal and things like that, but she was also a known socialist and communist and things like that. I didn't know that's a bit kind of like touchy now, as early, but the whole point of the book was just, hey, let's just recognize if we're going to put these people on a pedestal, here's all the other things that happen. Like the thing about FDR being like the person that brought economic prosperity to the United States, the person that led the country through a World War II. And like, those things are positive things, but, there's also the Japanese internment,
Yeah.
there's also the Barcetto program,
Yeah.
that basically say, oh, so remember all those people that we deported in like the 1920s? Oh, yeah, by the way, we want them back because all of our men are out at war and there's nobody to tend the fields because
Yeah.
we already locked up all the Japanese people.
I just I don't know. I think maybe it's because I'm older, right? I
Yeah.
don't think I would have questioned all of those things when I was a younger kid. And I guess in a way, I think the American system did, I guess, an okay job in explaining those historical figures and then
Hmm.
giving me some of the truth when I got older.
Hmm.
But maybe I think in my age right now, I think I would have like wanted to know more. But I guess that then brings into debate with, what should be acceptable for kids to be learning.
Well, that's the thing about Mr. Rogers that I found that was interesting is that it wasn't talking down to children about subjects like divorce or what does it mean to commit suicide or what does it mean for depression. It's like, if you just sit down and just let kids, like have a one-on-one conversation or like a parent to a child, it's like they have a deep understanding. It's like, they're still developing, my famous English teachers, like your frontal lobe is still developing. So all like your decision making process is like super impulsive. So like keep that in mind. But like even though that's happening and that's part of natural development of a child, they still learn things.
Yeah.
Like things are malleable. I think there is a deep understanding. I think Coco was a deep dive into what death means and like the traditions of Dia de los Muertos, but like on like I guess like outside of the reading of Dia de los Muertos, it's the the notion that children understand what it means for something to pass away,
Yeah.
whether that's a pet, an elder, or even a peer in some cases, and tragically in some cases, yeah, a peer. But like they have an understanding of what that is. And if they do have an understanding of what that is, then why do we not tell our kids the truth about some of
Yeah.
the things that happen?
I do agree with all of that too. I think if I were to be dealing with kids, which I do to some extent now. You know, I have my cousin who's about to be a freshman in high school, so
Mm-hmm.
um I guess he's technically a teen now. It doesn't count, but with kids, I normally when I talk to them, I don't really talk to them in the sense that I exclude certain things, but maybe I word things differently so they can understand it a little easier. And I think personally, if I was like, for example, an educator, I think I would be teaching them some of the things, but not like completely telling them everything, which I think kind of, I guess, is essentially how we grew up in the educational system. But I
Yeah.
would have liked to know as a kid that some of our like the figures in history are kind of like infallible people. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
not perfect. I
They're
think
not
that's
perfect. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean like that's understandable. You can do great things but still do horrible things as well. Like I think that's a lot of people right now. So
Yeah, I think painting like painting our leaders and painting folks that in history as imperfect or like they done a lot of good, but like there's other stuff that we can take back as either negative or like consider the time and context that they were living in.
yeah.
I guess in the frame of the Kennedys, right? They always be put on a pedestal, but in their private lives, there was opiate addiction, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a reflection of the greater conversation of mental illness and the
Yep.
intersection of drug abuse, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that is also something that can be powerful for some people, like to understand like this president went through an opiate addiction, right? Because of pain, because like injuries that were accrued during combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and on the other end is excellence that comes from people of color, or like acknowledging individuals that contributed to the idea of American greatness, right? Like talk about Frederick Douglass, talk about the individuals that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, and like I think I'm mentioning all these characters not characters, all of these individuals because it's like I'm trying to educate myself on Black history and during February.
Also, it's
James
Black History Month, so
James
very important.
Baldwin, learning about Malcolm X and all of these things, and talking about Black excellence when a lot of our, terrible to say, but a lot of our elders in our communities sometimes think that there's no excellence to be gained when the context they live through is the 19 and the 80s, and like this idea that if you're a person of color then equals crime, right?
Yeah.
And that sucks. I just, is that fair? It's like, is that a good, that's not a good stereotype, right? That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I would like to think that the opinion is slowly changing, especially
Mm-hmm.
because, there is a like two new generations of people that are growing up in an entirely different world than, a lot of our elders were. But I think, something that I think that has been a big issue is that like as much as, a lot of us do I support, Black Lives Matter
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. But I think to some degree there is a sense of like combativeness between people of color,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets a little scary sometimes, in my opinion, when that kind of stuff happens. So
Yeah, I think it's I think we're getting into the conversation about like anti-Asian American rhetoric around
got
the
you with the segue.
got Kalani, queen of segues. But this notion that we can't find solidarity because we're different in culture and different in things, I don't necessarily buy that. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think I am, my mind, and like the audience have their opinions, but like in my mind I do believe in this notion that API for Black lives,
Yeah.
and it, for us to be allies in that movement means that we see you, you're acknowledged. We're trying as much as we can to educate ourselves and educate our elders and understand, what it means,
Yeah.
for Black lives, right?
Yeah, I will say though, I can't ignore the fact that, there is a history of like elder Asians who have their own preconceived notions about people of color. And I think that exists very prevalently within the Asian community.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like we shouldn't be getting a pass for that. And I
Mm-hmm.
agree with I full-heartedly agree that Asians should not get a pass like that,
Mm-hmm.
Um I just, you know, it gets kind of tough when discussing these kind of issues because inherently I've been taught that you treat your elders with respect, but sometimes when I hear certain things that elders say about people of color, that makes me feel less inclined to be honoring them or treating them well, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily want to lose that, but at some point I got to speak up and say like, yeah, that's not,
That's not
yeah,
right.
that's not right. Yeah, that's
um
not.
but I do think, with the advent of Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, I think, a lot more Asians are doing their part in educating their elders about, their bad notions of people of color. And I hope to God that it does change as time goes on. But I do feel very worried for Asian elders right now with like the
That's
advent
yeah, yeah.
of like a lot of the attacks that have been happening. There was a Thai grandfather who was killed. Is a whole bunch of incidents of people getting hurt, and
Mm-hmm.
as 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 part of a community that I guess experiences, or I guess is a part or considered a visual minority, there's no way you can hide the fact that you're Asian and
Mm-hmm.
not get attacked. So
Right, right.
I don't know. It makes me angry that that kind of stuff is happening. And I'm glad that people are speaking up about it, but I do feel like in the grand scheme of things, a lot of the issues that have happened with Asian Americans or Asians in general in the United States and whatnot have been swept under the rug. And I don't know if maybe that's because we're not considered enough of a minority for people to care.
Or as I mentioned in my previous podcast, it's like this notion of the model minority myth that like it so pervades Asian culture that even in new immigrant communities, it's like, oh yeah, like if something happens, just don't say it. Just no, we don't want trouble. We don't want trouble.
Right.
Sort of mentality. But if that continues to happen, like there's zero data on Asian American crime,
Mm-hmm.
and nothing gets done. Nothing gets constructively done if nobody says something or nobody speaks out. And I think, yeah, what we mentioned before, I think there should be some form of like education or like some form of like understanding of where, how to educate our own families on this subject. But ultimately, it's like there is also this current fire of like this is happening in the now.
Yeah.
So like I think the problem is like I'm always fighting for the let's do as much as possible in this time, but I don't know if that's possible in this situation where now the current fire this time is attacking our elders in our community.
Yeah.
And I want to do both. I want to do both, and I'm doing that personally with my parents, but it's like it's tough. I think through line, I think it's almost down to a personal level if you want to do that with your family. But
Mm-hmm.
on the grander scheme, it's that advocacy. It's that I want to say boots on the ground, but it's like getting into the street and saying this enough is enough. This violence needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. To me, I think what scares me the most is like when I hear all of these stories about people getting attacked, I know very, very well that it could be my parents.
Yeah. Same.
Right. And I know my mom and my dad have worked their ass off to get to where they are now, and they did everything that they could to have a better life here. And for them to be seen as unequal just because of how they look and talk, it makes me angered or angry. And I think it's very common among people of color to experience some form of racism. And I know very well that my parents have experienced it. I have experienced it a little bit. It's like, even if it's like a minuscule form of it, everyone has kind of had that experience. And with everything that's happened so far, I think of those instances that have happened with my parents, and I kind of think, like, what if somebody did something to them, like, and I wasn't there? And it makes me scared. It makes me really nervous. And it's funny because the way that I'm talking about them is like how I would talk about my kids. Like, my kids, they go out so often. I worry about them, but I genuinely do worry for them. And they deserve the best, because they've worked really hard to get to where they are right now. And I know, like, if something like that were to happen, I don't think the person would even bat an eye at it happening. And it gets even scarier when like, the attacks are getting closer and closer to home.
Yeah.
Like, there was I was at work and I was talking to my boss, because I care about my boss a lot too. So I tell her to, like, be careful every single time I go home. But we were talking about how there was an attack on Rosemead.
Oh yeah, the person at the bus stop, right? And it was also a teacher, an educator.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those attacks are happening very rapidly, and I think it is an issue that is not being publicized. I don't think it has a lot of traction right now. I mean, I would hope that it is getting better, with so many celebrities speaking out about what happened to I don't unfortunately remember his name, but or actually no, it was a different one. I think it was the woman who got pushed over. There was like a monetary reward if you could find out information about what happened, and it was put out by like 2 celebrities, and I think one of them was Olivia Munn.
Oh yeah, I think it was Olivia Munn, to some degree, was somehow related to the victim in some way. So that explains that. But it's also like the greater conversation. Like, I believe Olivia Munn is part Asian, and it's also kind of like passing like identity. I do have family members that of whom are mixed Asian Caucasian sort of situations, and for them, they're probably seeing this too. I wonder what mixed race Asian Americans are feeling right now at this moment, or the adopted individuals, especially within the Korean community at the time. So like, what is each individual Asian group is taking in this information? Where we are of the Southeast Asian Vietnamese generation, right? Like, our families have a certain probably view of what's been happening right now. And I mentioned this before. It's like, because we immigrated fairly recently, we don't have the context of Chinese exclusion or Japanese internment,
right?
Or like, even the Vietnamese War on our end. Like, what does that meant for majority of the combat veterans being Black and brown people,
right?
So
it's a tough topic to discuss, especially since it involves people who look like us. You know what I mean? And I think if you think about it too hard, it's like, I know very well I could be attacked.
Same. Sorry, I'm just like, when you bring up the whole Rosemead situation, especially with that educator, as far as we know, like, he recovered, but like, how can you like fully recover from something like that?
Yeah.
But the thing that I want to bring up is that on a one-on-one basis for my family is that like I wanted to point out like strong comparisons or like strong moments in history where people of color or people in disadvantaged groups came together, Black and Asian, Jewish and Asian, to come together to say enough, this
Mhm.
is not right. In the case for Vincent Chin, when um Chinese, I believe Chinese American mistaken as Japanese in the Midwest, gets beaten to death days before his wedding, right? His mother, all she wants is some form of justice, just some form of like acknowledgement that they did something wrong. The people that did the bashing got off with probation and only thousands of dollars, not even that, like less than $2,000 fine for what they did, you know and Jesse Jackson came in, brought in um other activists of color to Vincent Chin's mother's side and like support this movement for Asian Americans. Like, hey, we're here. Why are we not getting justice for something that's clearly a racist attack?
Mhm. I mean, that's the problem, right? Like even with like I guess African Americans and black people who get attacked, you know, a lot of their perpetrators just get off with like a slap on their ass and they're just like on your way.
Mhm.
And I think that's horrible, these they were people. They had the same rights as any other person living in this country.
Mhm.
And like even with like the issue with Trayvon Martin, what happened to, the person who shot him?
Mhm.
He just walked away. If anything, he has a bigger name now, you
And
know? And
dude,
that's horrifying, They made a horrible decision and they got famous for that. Like
that doesn't make sense.
it
Yeah.
doesn't, And there's so many of these instances of people getting let off with no repercussions and then becoming even more well known because like in the post run of whatever happened. And I think that's a really bad thing to happen because these people should not be, highlighted in our society. They should be, dealing with the repercussions of their decisions,
Mhm.
And I this just ties into this, like me being cynical about everything, but like it's just, I unfortunately don't really have that much faith in our, police force and system right now. And um I never had the discussion with my family where it was like, if a cop, pulls you over, you listen exactly to what they do.
Mhm.
I think I actively can say that I'm in a position where I don't think about it as frequently as, other people of color. And I think, in general, people should not have to worry about that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And, there are so many cases that where, these people have been just kind of like, oh, they lost their job. Like, what does that do? And then later on, you hear that they got their job back. Like,
At a different precinct, or in some cases, become famous, especially the whole what you mentioned before, the whole Trayvon Martin thing.
yeah, it just, everything just circles back. There is no repercussions for these people, and there should be.
Yeah, and I hope, I think I might still have a bit hope. I think that's probably because I work closely with students, to talk about these things, to communicate, like just be real with them. But at the same point, like I try to keep some hope. And it's just, I don't want to be dark about it, but like it's just, it gets to a point. It's like I don't know if it's nihilism, but like I hope that what I'm doing is enough, or good enough. And I think the thing is, it's like I'm scared if like it's all good until something out of my control attacks that,
Yeah,
or devalues that, or stops it from existing.
right.
So like I'm gonna try my best. And it's like I think to some degree there is some hope that I still have, but it's really testing that, you know. And
Yeah.
I think it's all I think on an individual basis, I think it's for a lot of people, it's a testing moment. You know, how are they gonna react to something like this? What is what what can we do as just adults and teachers and parents and aunts as uncles, you know, to be there for not just the kids but also for these parents that are probably feeling scared right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we thought in our minds, to some degree, we live in a predominantly black and brown community, and you know, almost 50-50 Asian Chicano community. But you know, that violence is still here. You know, like for like in Koreatown, like last week, an elderly grandmother was beaten, an Air Force veteran was beaten, a Japanese, I from what I remember, it was a Japanese Buddhist temple, had a rock thrown through it, and I think a lamp holder, or like it was like a wooden stand, got burnt at the temple.
Yeah.
So how do we meet this? What Here's the thing. I think this is a question that may not have answers. And like, how do we meet this moment in time where it's fresh, where it's red hot, and you know, there is like the analogy of a blacksmith, like it's malleable enough that we could hammer it, right? But in the act of hammering that piece of metal while it's hot, right? What will it be in the end for
Mm.
us as a community? Will it be a work of art, or will it be a paperweight where it just doesn't change, right?
Right. I don't know. I just think this situation, the current situation at hand, is I I mean, I don't want to say that I saw it coming, but it doesn't surprise me that it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I mentioned it back when we were talking about the elections that throughout, um, I guess, the 4 years of the presidency, I was just kind of waiting and waiting, expecting my turn to come for something to happen, and then it did. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I I want something to come out of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I really do want there to be a more prevalent discussion about Asian Americans and Asians in general in the United States.
Right.
And you know, up until COVID hit, you know, there was a rise, I think, in the visibility of Asian Americans in films and, you know, in music and stuff like that.
And
Um,
like, and accolades, you know, this was something that like really shocked me, is this notion that, oh, February, Parasite won Best Picture, right? Best Director, and like all of these awards and the Academy Awards and the Golden Globes, right? A month later, coronavirus happens, you know, shutdowns, everything. And then you have a situation where the president is calling it the Chinese virus, right? Like calling it by other things other than the coronavirus, right? And really politicizing it as, oh, it came from Asia, therefore, you know, it's not racist if it comes from China, right? Then what does that mean as an American citizen? Like it's super crazy. It's like we've celebrated the win of a movie that looked like You and Me to some degree as the Asian identity of ours, right? Wins one of the biggest awards in filmmaking, and then next month coronavirus happens, and all of this just like puts everything into like a fire of like rhetoric and like, you know, anti-Asian hate. And like now I think it just like it has been something that was building up from point A to point B, and this is the point B. But
yeah,
how do we get from point B to the next letter, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to like fucking Z, right?
right. I do wonder if like I don't want to put it this way, but I guess because of, everything that we've been talking about the past couple of times, me being, negative doesn't is not surprising to anybody in the slightest. But
There's a theme.
I guess I really am a cynic at heart. Who knew? But I do wonder if like those instances of, Asian excellence, were they just being used as an example, like of the world being like, oh, look, we have changed a lot. And then things not changing at all. I do hope in the future as time goes by, things change and all of these attacks on the elderly and on Asians will stop. In the grand scheme of things, I hope that the, I guess, disenfranchisement of, maybe that's not the right word, but I guess like the plight of Black people in the US becomes much more prevalent. I think in general, I think like the only way you can fully understand the issue of Asian Americans being attacked right now is if you understand, Black people being attacked in the United States as well, because that's been happening for years. I'm not saying that, Asian Americans were never attacked back then, but I think very much those two situations are in tandem right now.
Especially, I think, especially in modern history, yes, and that's true. There is a context of Chinese exclusion, and one of the biggest histories of like Chinese American immigration to the United States is like one of the biggest lynchings in Californian history was because of Chinese immigrants in the community of like LA, right? Like literally 20 miles down this way, right? There is a museum that commemorates the deaths of, I think, around 14 to 15 Chinese immigrants in Los Angeles, like lynchings, right? Like these were lynchings.
Mm-hmm.
And, it happened in LA. So like that's the history of communities of color in the United States, and that's the context in which we live here. And hopefully folks don't misconstrue this as like anti-American. Like, no, like I don't think the fact that we're talking about the ills of the United States make us any anti-American, as I guess what other name a country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's recognizing, I think the main thesis is like recognizing the faults, and
Yeah.
how do we move on from that, or how
Mm-hmm.
do we meet it in a constructive level to say, hey, we fucked up,
Right.
but let's make sure we don't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Because we would think about that, like we like 5 more chapters away from finishing Farewell to Manzanar, right, between me and my dad. The notion of separating families, right? Like I was talking about how parts of the chapter where I think Janine or Jen, well, I'll just call her Jenny, but like the main character, the main protagonist that we follow, she gets separated from her dad, right? It's just her mom and her kids, right? It's like as a kid at the age of like 5 or 6 at the time, like what are you thinking at that moment that your dad gets taken away from you and you're being stuffed into basically a concentration camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what does that do for a kid? And then I brought in the the conversation. It's like like when the Twin Towers fell, it was the Middle Eastern, North African population that was feeling it, and now with this rhetoric about immigration that's got to be honest has started since like 08 or 04, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ever since this rhetoric on immigration, it's been taken to the nth degree with what had happened recently in the border. It's like separating families at the border, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're dealing with that as we speak too, so I'm getting sweaty talking about this, but it just these are things that I've been following and I've been very passionate about. And like both if I don't have the answers, I'm damn well as an audience member, just know that I'm learning. And it's like it's a constant thing about being open enough to take in the information, contextualize the information, and then bring it back to like family, or bring it back to friends, or bring it back to the community.
Right. To piggyback of what you were saying originally, yeah, I don't believe that us talking about the inherent flaws of our society necessarily means that we hate America. I think if anything, it's a sign of how much we love it and want it to improve for our future generations to come. Because I know for a fact that I don't want my cousin to live in a world where all of this kind of stuff is happening. And I just, it's going to be a long and difficult road in order to contextualize and understand everything that's been happening, whether it be incidents from our past, incidents that probably will come in the future as well. And I don't know, to piggyback and go all the way back to our original conversation about education, you know, I think for our future generations, that's what will essentially will define how our kids will grow up, how they learn about those things when they're younger. And I guess that's to piggyback off everything why I want our educational system to be better. You know, in the future, I'm not gonna say I mean in the grand scheme of things, I don't think any of these instances against Asian Americans will ever be highlighted in a book. You know, but I do greatly hope that in the here and now that we're living, that you and I are still alive and still here on Earth, you know, we do our part to make sure that, you know, people of color, no matter who they are treated the way that they should be treated as Americans.
Right. Oh my God. I'm gonna see like I'm trying to do and program, and I mentioned before in the pre-podcast interview that I want to talk to more Asian Americans in the communities, both like, you know, folks currently in college, or like individuals that are professionals in their careers, and, you know, talk about how they feel about all of these things. It's like I'm already feeling it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're feeling it the same way I'm feeling it, but like I'm noodling in this current emotion right now.
I wouldn't say I'm noodling per se. I do think I'm in a sense kind of angry. And I think that's what's driving me to be much more attentive about it. Like I'm trying my best not to get in lack of better word, lost in the sauce. I don't want these experiences to get passed off as something that I should accept as just happening.
Right.
And you know, I don't talk about it that often because I don't think a lot of people like talking about these instances of racism, but you know, in the times that I do, in the times that someone asks me how I feel about those type of things, I will be very honest. And I think that's at least the bare minimum of what I could do in terms of like the situation that's happening, and trying my best to kind of make sense of all of the stuff that's just happening currently.
Sorry.
Wanda Vision.
No, I don't know how we're gonna get out of this. I do want to fact check. I was questioning earlier if it was a Korean Buddhist temple or a Japanese Buddhist temple. It looks like it is a Japanese Buddhist temple.
I mean, on a lighter note, you know, I remember when those instances of like, you know, BTS blowing up, you know, Parasite winning those awards made me feel, I don't know, it made me feel seen for the first time. It was really strange. It wasn't anything like, you know, those people are me, because we're very much different people. You know, I'm not Korean, and you know, but seeing someone that looked like me doing well made me very happy.
And And I go back and forth, especially with the Academy Awards, right? Like, or just the function of giving awards, right? Like I go
Thinking
back and
about
forth.
Minari.
Yeah, well, I think we could transition with Minari, and I do want to get into that. But in terms of like Asian excellence, or valuing like Asian identity in the forms of media and things like that is important, right? Your emotion that you just clearly stated, right? That's important to
Mhm.
a person that's trying to understand who they are in the context of their Asianness, right?
Mm.
Right. It builds up that, oh, it's like this could be something I could do, right? Like
Mhm.
before, many Asian American families are like, oh, well, you just trying to be an actor. It's like, like who's gonna recognize you, so unless you do kung fu or action, right? Who's
Right.
gonna recognize you for those roles, right? And then Awkwafina gets a Golden Globe, right?
Mhm.
And then Parasite wins movie of the year, right? So it's like it to some degree, I used to be very jaded about awards, but like they do mean something, right? They do
Mhm.
mean something in the context of the culture that is around them, right? There is, of
Mhm.
course, a monetary value too, right? A lot of Academy Award nominations, like those movies don't make their money back unless they get a nomination, right?
Right.
So like there is a monetary value, but on a social level of like Parasite, of Moonlight, of Call Me by Your Name, right? Like these are important films to some degree, and them being awarded, that's also important too, because it validates those communities, right?
Right.
Whether it's the Black community, whether it's the gay community, whether it's the Asian American community, right? These films, or just the Asian community, because it's not Asian Americans and Parasite, but within the Asian context, like these films mean something to the broader communities they come from.
Mhm. I mm, I guess I do think I'm very happy about it. But look at the cynic in me talking. But I do kind of take those victories with a grain of salt sometimes. Specifically because I know very well that it's like those victories are also coming from the people who are in power, which I think very
Mm-hmm.
obviously is just kind of like, you know, I guess white people per se.
Yeah.
So um I I love these victories that have happened. Don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong. I think, seeing these movies succeed and do well makes me very happy on the inside, but I do know that it's as a result of people in power choosing these films and whatnot to support. And maybe for, I guess, on the like looking hopefully, maybe it could be that they do genuinely support the ideals of these films,
Mm-hmm.
and that with this kind of visibility, it's showing what we should be considered as acceptable in
Mm-hmm.
society. And I think, like, as much as I am very cynical about everything, that's in the end how I would like to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
How are we being portrayed in society? How are we being portrayed in entertainment? How um all of these views are being supported by all of these big name companies, which I don't know if it's considered as, fake social media marketing or whatnot, but I would like to think that these companies understand and see the importance in all of these issues that are coming up. So,
Yeah. I definitely would hope so. I think I
but
just take as many victories as we can, but also recognizing, yeah, there is more to be done, right?
mhm,
Parasite won Best Picture, but this, in spite of none of the actors getting nominations, right?
yeah.
Like on an individual basis, like there are really good performances in that film, right?
Mhm,
Like, why are we not recognizing and celebrating that with nominations, right?
mhm.
Especially with the 2019 Academy Awards, where Aquafina didn't get a nomination when she clearly won the Golden Globes.
Right.
And I know there's no such thing as a guarantee in Hollywood, but I wasn't thinking that she was going to get an Academy Awards, but I knew that she, at the very least, to be nominated because The Farewell was a fucking good movie.
It was such a good movie.
Exactly. Justice for Aquafina, and definitely going to watch Raya and the Last Dragon.
Me too.
Yes.
I think I think if Aquafina had gotten nominated in the like for playing her role in The Farewell, I think I would have been like busting my ass crying because out of all the films that I've seen, like I have never identified with a story as much as I did with The Farewell because that very inherently is tied with stories that I've experienced and experiences that I've had with my family. And not only that, you know, for her character to be very similar to who I am as a person, I think I would have genuinely cried. Like I would have been rolling on the floor, bawling my eyes out with a bucket of tissues and a bag of chips and like a tub of ice cream somewhere. That would have been me.
Grabbing your closest Pokemon plushie.
You know what? I also do have on a side note, like,
oh my god, did you get it? Oh my god.
Have 3 of us.
Do I want to be a 27-year-old? Wait, oh my god, I aged myself up. Oh my god. Do I want to be a 26-year-old going to a McDonald's and getting a Happy Meal?
You know what? I had a friend of mine who bought the thing with me because I got the green one very recently with one of my friends before eating dinner with them. And then she was like, I'm gonna pop out the ears on the box so I can make it. And then she captioned it with, I am an adult. Like I took a picture of the box because I was like, this is so cute. I need to save this for the rest of my life. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, just give it a moment. Oh yeah. Okay, I think I've seen it on your Instagram. Yeah. You know, also you could screenshot that to me and then I could just put that.
I will totally do that for you. But anyway, as a big side note, I guess, I don't know. I don't know. I want to think that things will be better.
Yeah.
Like to go back onto our discussion. I hope that things will be better. I'd like to think that what the world sees as acceptable in society is changing. And I think if, you know, it's hard to think about it, but, you know, 10 years ago, you know, the way that we all talked about, you know, race and inequality was completely different from how we talk about it now. So who knows how things will turn out, right? You know,
yeah,
we can always hope for the best.
Yeah, and hope for the leaders to meet the moment, and I think also for even just citizens, right? Like just to say, hey, like if they're not working for you, you can easily just vote them out, right? Or just say like, hey, this is not working out. You're gonna go travel to Cancun. Yeah, like that's not right.
You know what though? You know what? Like as a segue, I guess. Since we were talking about entertainment, you know, I am really excited that Monica Rambeau is in WandaVision. Like, I don't know. I love her character. It's so good, and you know, it's wild to think that in a couple of like a year or so, we're gonna see a like an Asian ensemble playing in a Marvel film. Like, I would never.
that is amazing in and itself. Also for hopefully positive representation. There, you know, WandaVision, they have kids, Billy and what's the superhero? Tommy and Billy, right?
Yeah, Billy and Tommy.
Billy and Tommy. But in the Marvel universe, in at least in the comic books, it's like Tommy and Wiccan, which is Tommy's character. He's actually gay in the source, in this material. I hope they keep that because I was thinking about this. Too. It's like
check.
I want to I'm gonna send you a video also. I want that because, you know, with my skepticism about Disney, I hope that they stick with some of these stories from the comic books. And I know I would always be the person that be like, oh, let the creators create, what they want.
Right.
But I'm thinking it's like, in the themes of, having a queer superhero, like why, like we could have that with Tommy.
I'd be very excited for it. Apparently it's a very big like thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire video on YouTube. I will send you the link so you can link it because it's a very good video on the discussions of gay representation in Marvel films and comics.
Mm-hmm.
But in particular, I think they mentioned that so far, a lot of times, like when a comic comes out and that couple is in there, they are relegated to like a side discussion. Like that they're there, but they're not really 100% there. And
Ooh, that diversity checkbox phenomenon.
so I think it's one of those in the future, right? If they do become characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if they do a really good job at providing them visibility, I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that'll be really good because they haven't had that before. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times when the person was explaining it, they were saying that in the comics, a lot of times, a lot of people didn't really want them to be a couple, especially the head of, I don't know who, like it was a company executive, but essentially he hated the idea of them
It
being a
was
couple.
it was the head of Marvel before the buyout from Disney.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, cross your fingers, but if Marvel does a really good job at providing like a story for those characters, I think it could be a really good instance of them being inclusive.
Yeah. I am definitely hope so because there is this notion that they try to cater towards a foreign market.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the foreign market doesn't like LGBTQ plus um, representation. Hint hint wink wink, the whole like blink you miss it, like LGBT representation in Star Wars. When
Right.
leading up to the movie, I was like, oh yeah, there'll be some representation. It's like blinking you miss it.
I I want to give Marvel hope that they'll
Mhm.
change the story because in history's past, a lot of the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe have been rewritten. Though I think part of it was because they didn't have the rights to the characters owned by Fox at the time. Is it
All right.
Fox? Was it? It was
Well,
Fox.
it's a combination of Fox and Sony.
Well, essentially, they didn't have the copyright to those characters, and so
Mhm.
like for example, since we're talking about Wanda, her story was changed a little bit in comparison to the comics, because in the comics she's a mutant.
Yeah, and like the alleged son and daughter of Magneto.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's they have done things where they changed the story before,
Hmm.
and even with like for example the Mandarin in I think one of the Iron Man films, I think
Hmm.
in the comics it was like a racist caricature of like I think Asians back then.
Hmm.
Um, but for a second, they really got us in the first half. They had him as a character, but then he was like, "I am an actor,"
Yeah.
and then the villain turned out to be someone completely different. So
Hmm.
I think if they can do that, I think it very well could be they could do a better job at representing different characters and their relationships as time goes on.
Yeah, and hopefully it's not either what you mentioned as like a checkbox in diversity, right? Checking
Mm-hmm.
the boxes of diversity, or it's not just a fuck you to the former head of Marvel that's hey, no gay characters at all.
Yeah. Uh it's like we mentioned before, I think I have my own kind of opinions on Marvel as films.
Hmm.
But
Ooh,
like in
okay.
terms of like a checkbox, right? Like I think in the long run, if they can provide engaging stories without it feeling like it was deliberately made that way, I think it'll be really good. For example, I think Wanda and Vision, specifically in Infinity War, I think was a is a good role reversal of the very stereotypical damsel in distress theme, because it wasn't Wanda, it was Vision. And I think that in a way is kind of empowering to Wanda as a character. Personally, that's my opinion, but yeah.
So going back to Marvel, I think we do want to a little bit talk about Wanda. I think we mentioned WandaVision a lot. You enjoying the series?
It's so good. I love it so much.
It's so good. I never thought that. Okay, before my criticisms for Marvel, it was all spectacle, and I thought DC was better in like tackling emotions, especially like, you know, Joker and like the Batman, like the Christopher Nolan Batman series and things like that. By the time WandaVision comes around, and you know, like there's Endgame and like Infinity War and like Tony Stark dying, and like a lot of meaning comes from that, right? You know, got a sense of emotion out of that. But I was still thinking like these are kind of spectacle films, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can understand where Martin Scorsese was talking. You know, it was all kind of spectacle. But in this series, though, like it throws a wrench into that notion, right? It throws a wrench into that idea that, you know, it's just pure spectacle, because, you know, what we see in this series, though, that there's still a lot of special effects, there's still a lot of, you know, the whole like Marvel money behind it. It still shows a story of grief and trying to come out of trauma in the end. And hopefully we're not spoiling anything yet, because there's only one more episode left. But I think in the themes of what WandaVision is setting out for is that, you know, for a character we don't see as often, in the context of focusing at with this character, is like you realize in a short amount of time her brother dies, right? Then this global thing called Thanos comes around. She has to kill her synthezoid husband, right? Or partner, gets resurrected and then killed again by Thanos, right? Like what does that do to a human, right?
Yeah. I so I have watched a lot of videos on Marvel and DC recently. So I do know for a fact that the Justice League was much more popular in the heyday of comics compared to, you know, the Avengers. And I don't want to say I inherently think this is the problem with DC films, but I think the reason why DC doesn't do as well as Marvel does currently is because they're trying to fit into the Marvel like model. These movies that Marvel has put out has spanned the course of years, you know, and I think if anything has like proven that should prove to DC they shouldn't be doing that, it would be Joker, because Joker was its own standalone film and it did wonderfully well,
right?
And it was a very engaging film too. So, you know, I think, you know, if I guess the people who are part of that DC kind of figure that out, I think they'll be able to empire their own, I guess, new coming of age of films for superheroes. But
I think it's varying degrees of success, because Aquaman was pretty good, right? Well, the first Wonder Woman is really good. And Shazam was good. But in terms of what DC could do, it's like, yeah, that is the fault of DC. They saw something that was popular, they saw something that worked, and they try to replicate it without understanding like the minutia of like what are the individual reasons why it worked.
Right. I mean, even then, right? Some of the Marvel films back in the day were not exactly too great. Like, I'm pretty sure anyone
X-Men 2 and 3.
Yeah, and you know, even then, you know, like Thor even wasn't considered like that great of a film until Ragnarok came out.
Yeah.
So it's not like Marvel is doing perfect films all around, you know, but I do think the reason why so many people enjoy the Marvel films is not necessarily their characters being shown on screen, but I think there's a a sense of relatability to characters that are almost kind of like seen as being hello.
Is that a fire alarm? Is your mom cooking something?
I think a vacuum's going off right now. I don't know
Oh,
why. I was like,
is your dad
hello?
is your dad going through the door and then be like, "Hey, I'm gonna vacuum quick in your room."
No, I thought he was asleep. Well, anyway, I think there's a sense of relatability to these characters that are almost seen as other, kind of like seen as otherworldly. And I don't think you kind of get that with DC characters. I think there's like a sense of campy. No, not well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being campy per se, but I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of the stuff that they do doesn't make sense for their characters.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there I am 100% sure that Superman has killed somebody, and he's
Yeah.
not supposed to kill anybody.
How could he not? That battle through Metropolis is like there's bound to be collateral.
Exactly. Someone has 100% died. And that's kind of hard to be doing as Superman specifically because he's kind of like that one guy that doesn't kill anybody. Unless you're talking about like there's like a comic book where he goes like all bad and it's insane. But
Mm-hmm.
needless to say, I don't know. I've liked certain Marvel films because I think they do get the emotions right. Like for example, if you want to talk about like sadness and dealing with trauma, Thor is also actually a really good character to be discussing because he loses his mom and then he loses his best friend and then he loses everybody in his home and then
Mm-hmm.
he loses half of the people who lived at his home.
Right.
So it's like, and then coming into Infinity War, it's like what does he have left?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of is the same for Wanda, who in the show you can, she lost her family at a young age to Tony Stark, and she's been listening to other people for her entire life, and then she loses her brother, and then she loses the Vision, and then watches him
Twice.
twice.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's only so much pain that one could deal with before you get to a sense of like
I like how people
coping.
were losing their minds because Thor was played for laughs in for for Endgame, but I was like in the same thought as you. I was thinking, yeah, he's been through a lot. How do you not think like yeah, the playing for laughs part like may not be best, but like still though, it's like this is a character that's like the perceived leader for his people, right? Half of them, are gone because of Hela, and plus the blip, right? The snap. So
Well,
how? Why? Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, that's kind of like a result of having Taika Waititi as a director on the film. Because
Mhm.
if anything, has been a part of his, I guess, resume per se, it's the fact that he can do comedy as well as drama very seamlessly in his films.
Oh yeah. Remember Jojo Rabbit?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
He there's like a sense of happiness and being very jovial in
Hmm.
Jojo Rabbit, but he very easily can switch it into being a moment of sadness. And I think that aside from the fact that Ragnarok in comparison to the Shakespearean script of its predecessors per se,
Hmm.
um Ragnarok is seen as a very fun movie, but
Hmm.
in kind of like the fun and the happiness, there's like a sense of sadness, and I think that kind of goes very consistently with real life, where sometimes the happiest people are sometimes the most depressed and the saddest.
Real quick, also for fans of Taika Waititi, on YouTube, I believe Hunt for the Wilder People is free to watch with ads. So it's one of
Ooh.
Taika Waititi's like original films, like when he was in Australia, and like he talks about like it's like a dramedy, like a drama comedy,
Mm-hmm.
but set around like an uncle on the run from the law and his nephew that's like with him, and then like they're like an indigenous family too, so or at least the child is considered indigenous Australian, so it's like understanding that too, so
Put the link in the description.
but the link in the description.
But yeah, no, I just think he does both of those very well. And maybe I don't want to kind of say it for everybody, but I think it can be very well said that the it seems like there's a lot of love and care put into directing these films.
Yeah,
So um I
i
think
i
there's a
th-
sense of being genuine.
I think that over time, yes, it's like there has now been trust in the directors, these creators, like outside of the Disney machine to some degree, to say like, hey, we trust you, and we picked you as directors because we want you to tell stories like these, like Thor, like WandaVision, like
Mhm.
Shang-Chi, right?
Shang-Chi is the new one coming out, yeah.
Shang-Chi's the new one coming out, like um the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which everybody's gonna be shipping.
Oh my God, wait. Also, can I just say I'm also very excited for the Eternals because Don
Oh
Lee is
yeah.
in it and I love Don Lee.
And also Kumail Nanjiani, where
Yes.
he
And
got
Angelina Jolie, Jesus Christ.
really Angelina Jolie's in there too.
Yeah. Okay, wait, hold on. I also need to give you context because I'm pretty sure you don't know who Don Lee is, right? Do you?
I remind me.
Okay. Have you watched Train to Busan before?
I think I was drunk.
Okay, well, in do you remember any of the characters?
Was Don Lee one of the main characters?
Don Lee is the dad who has the expectant wife, like the wife that's pregnant.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, he apparently lived in the US and is fluent in English. Did not know that. But a side note, yeah,
Oh, I recognize him. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Sorry.
So, either way, I'm very excited for that film to come out. I'm really I'm hoping Shang-Chi will be good. Um, I don't know. I it's kind of like a weird discussion about Shang-Chi because it's like part of it is like I know Shang-Chi has some kind of like caricatures of Asians in a certain way, so I do wonder how they're gonna go around doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
when you are doing a superhero movie and it involves a ethnic Asian character, right? How do you how do you dance around the whole idea of like Asian and martial arts?
yeah, and but besides the point, I have a question that I do want to ask though.
Yes.
Um, what is your favorite thing about WandaVision so far? To go back to what we were originally were talking.
It might be a spoiler though.
I mean, it could be anything. It could be like, how the story is written, how they depict trauma, like.
I just think the tech, like the use of the format that the use of the sitcom format to talk about trauma, like what Wanda's going through, and like I know it's like for a new person coming in to some degree, it's like, oh well, there's a bunch of other movies that like you need to watch before you get to here, but like I think some of those themes are very much universal, and I find it fascinating that Monica Rambeau, like that character, is like our conduit into what Wanda is feeling too. It's not just a Wanda story per se, but it's also like a story of Monica Rambeau too.
Mm-hmm.
Like once I think episode 4 comes around and you're like, oh, who's this new character? It's like, oh, it's like related to Captain Marvel and all of these things, and then you realize, oh, could she be Photon, and like and all of these things, is she going to be a superhero in and of herself?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I have like how they use this sitcom style to kind of like show this story, and then see it unfold, and hopefully this is not like one of those things in superhero movies or superhero fiction where it's like power creep of a character.
Mm.
But hopefully, I just well, there's one more episode. It's next week, next Thursday at 12 a.m. where apparently my internet decides to crap out and Disney decides to crash.
I mean, you already know that a lot of people are going to be tuning in to watch the finale, so
Oh my God, you're right.
yeah.
It's either be there at the same time as everybody else or just wait an hour later and just watch it.
Yeah. But if anything, I think, Disney has been doing very well with the Marvel films, and I think a lot of people can genuinely say that they like The Mandalorian. So, if anything has, been proven, I think they're doing a really good job with all of these kind of like short episodic shows, I guess.
Yeah.
And I really hope WandaVision ends up well. I'm a little worried, I'm not gonna lie, because of the post-credit scene from the last episode, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I this is just kind of like a side thought. I thought it would have been really cool, even though I'm pretty sure it would have never happened, if there was 7 episodes only and it was like the 7 stages of grief.
Okay, I see.
But that was not the case, so I'm not really abiding by that. But it's just I'm really excited to see where this show goes, and it's been really good. I've enjoyed watching all of kind of like the sitcoms and stuff and being like, oh my God, I know where that's from.
You're like, that's Malcolm in the Middle.
Exactly, yeah. So I hope they do it justice, but if the past 8 episodes have been showing anything, it's that they're doing a really good job with it. So
Last thing, hopefully we could wrap this up in like 6 minutes, but I do want to ask one last thing. We gotta watch Minari one of these days. I don't know if it's gonna be like a group screening or something like that, but it's so good.
I'm still sad that it got scuffed from an award, but I'm excited.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it was a not snubbed, but per se, but it was a mischaracterization of the film.
I guess, yeah.
It was more when I saw the film through an A24 screening, right? Or screener, it was a film that I thought, although it's like in majority Korean, like 80% Korean, right? It's a quintessential American dream story, right?
Mm-hmm.
This family moved from California, where they initially immigrated to the southern US to own land, to become farmers, to create their American dream. It's just this idea notion that because it was like 80% Korean or like spoken in a foreign language, it's like disqualifies it from being an actual nomination for the Golden Globes. I hope that's different for the Academy Awards, but it's just boggles my mind.
Right. It's I don't think a movie should be, I guess, categorized by what language the characters are speaking. So it's just I don't know if it's because of the preconceived notions that immigration is not as significant in America. We have fucking camps, and I mean that's like the worst way to explain what's happening. But I think immigration is inherently tied with America. I don't think there is like a definitive race of people in America. I don't know if that's the best way to be putting it, but I think the idea of immigration and stories about it are very quintessentially American. And for them to just kind of like put it in a specific slot because it was spoken in Korean just kind of makes me upset.
And for some degrees, like the farewell when God, I forgot the director's name, but all comes
Lulu
to me.
Wang.
Lulu Wang. When all of this stuff happened during the Golden Globes and during the Academy Awards, or I think during the Golden Globes, because it was nominated for Best Foreign Film. I think both foreign film in the Academy Awards and foreign film in the Golden Globes. But it's like I guess the decision to categorize it as a foreign film was because it had major portions as spoken with Mandarin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to think, well, the Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, it had many portions of the film was spoken in French and German. And so, like, is that a foreign film? Does that disqualifies it from becoming a Academy Awards nominated film? Like, wouldn't, because it's a white director, doesn't make them much more acceptable to be rewarded on one category over another? I think these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're trying to, like, at least recognize the achievements of these artists, or like these people that are wanting to talk about these stories of, like, in one case, trying to understand both your Asian identity and your American identity going back home to your family, and this other identity where it's like you're moving from one part of the country to another just to get your American dream.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to categorize that as foreign film? Oh, this notion of foreign film, because there have been foreign films that won Best Picture too.
Mm-hmm. It's just hard. Hopefully things will change in the future. I still also look like a wrestling referee.
I was thinking freestyle rapper. What would be your referee nickname for your alter ego?
I don't know, DJ Khaled. As a referee. What does he say?
Another one?
Oh my god, you start another wrestling round? Another one. DJ Khaled.
I was also thinking DK, but I was just like, well, God damn it, Brian, you just watched Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift again.
DK. Donkey Kong. No.
Well, yeah, but I was thinking about it in the context of Fast and Furious.
The only thing I know about Fast and Furious is
right. That song still slaps after how many years?
Oh my god, wait, have you ever seen the Polar Express but drifting?
Oh god.
Okay, I need to show you that after this ends.
You know what? Let's end this podcast because, as much as we always try to say it's going to be a quick episode with me and Kalani, this is a long episode.
How long is it? What's the time?
Maybe an hour and a half. Just
ain't that.
Just your normal Marvel film.
At least we didn't say that we hated a Marvel film this time.
At least we also say we didn't. We hate love.
Okay, but that's in specifically reference to films. Okay, I like love as long as it doesn't look fake.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for checking out our podcast. Hopefully we will get a much more deeper conversation about Minari. I know this next couple of podcasts might be more heavy hitting. Yeah, I understand. But also this is something I'm interested in. So deal with it. We
can always do lighter episodes later on, talking about
anime and
movies.
And how
politics
and how much we really want to ship Falcon and Winter Soldier.
That's you. I will see when the episode comes out.
You're like, you know what? Locked away, ship in the back, but I'm gonna enjoy the story.
Hey man, if it happens, right? I ain't gonna say otherwise. If it doesn't, I'm gonna just be like, okay. I'm waiting.
It's not as bad as the ships from Supernatural, where it's like they're brothers.
Didn't they ship Castiel and Sam? And then that became a thing in the last season.
Is it? Maybe.
Okay, that's a side note. Just
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Let's end this podcast. So, anyways, hope you like and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next episode, y'all.
And yeah.
All right. Bye.